cause I can do it my way. Me making music's like shooting hoops in the driveway.
Today on Mastered with Mike, I'm sitting down with someone I've known for the better part of 3 decades, Mark Chabus. Mark is the author of Remembering Your Spirit, a book that chronicles tragedy and spiritual awakening around 9/11. He's also the voice behind the Substack, The Return with Mark Chabus, where he writes about intuition, spirit, and coming back to who you really are. But I knew Mark before all of that, before houses, before bills, before kids, before life got heavy. And what I've always admired about him is this: he followed his intuition, not when it was easy, but when it was hard, when it didn't make sense, and when it required courage. So often the universe shows us the path, but we decide it's too difficult. Mark didn't. Today we're going to talk about what happens when you actually listen and what it costs and gives to live that way. Welcome to the show, buddy. Yeah, I mean, we haven't seen each other in forever. Where are you now currently? Are you Jersey or
I'm in North Carolina.
North Carolina? So we're going to get to how you wound up in North Carolina. A young man from Long Island. Tell the audience, tell us about your early life. Where does Mark Chabus come from?
Yeah, grew up on Long Island, New York. Obviously, same town as you. That's how we met. It's interesting because and I guess the conversation will maybe go in this direction eventually, but I think that I'm going through this interesting stage of my life where I am sort of dissecting all of that, like where I came from, like what the beginning was like. And interestingly, I feel like I didn't have access to a lot of what happened to me. And that's for like survival purposes, like the show must go on, right? So, and the body is extremely intelligent, so it knows what it needs to put away to be dealt with later, so it can just kind of go on with life and we don't just fall apart at the seams. So I only opened up the door to that, I would say, like 3 years ago. I think, I wrote a book. It's called Remembering Your Spirit, and the book is about, losing my girlfriend in 9/11, and then the path that it took, from experiencing grief and anxiety and panic attacks and just like health issues and stuff as a result of, that tragedy, and finding spirituality and healing, and, the path it took to get to a place where I could feel whole and, healthy and happy again. But nowhere in the book do I talk about my childhood being anything outside of like normal, what I considered normal. And it wasn't until, and I'll get more into this in detail later, but it wasn't until a couple of years ago when I sort of started to explore that. And there was a reason for it, which I'll get into, and realized there was a lot about my childhood that was not okay and was not normal and was not healthy. I just didn't know it at the time. And I didn't make enough space to even allow for that information to come up. And even if it did, I don't even know if I would have known what to do with it. Right.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Now, I was going to say it's interesting because I think, if you don't look at your past, and I think I had some similar stuff that like you did. My mom was sick for a very long time, died very early, but that's almost a separate life from now. But it's not a separate life. This is exactly my life. And that is what I'm doing now, and how I feel now is a direct path from that time in my life. But I don't know if we're taught to do that, or just the body, like you says, shuts it out so that the show must go on. You have to keep moving forward. That there'll still be times to, like, as a 49-year-old man, I will cry in my car on the way to work because of something that happened to me over 25 years ago. And that's that emotion trying to come out. I haven't looked at it in a long time. I certainly haven't examined it, which I probably should. But it's a good point. And I just think that your early childhood, it's not a different person. It's the same exact person that you are. So we have to give that space.
Right.
So it's interesting that's not in your book, though.
No, it's not in my book. And it wasn't even because I consciously kept it out because I wanted to paint a certain picture. It was I really didn't even have access to it. And so it just didn't seem important. I mean, it didn't even seem like it was a problem. I just remembered the highlights. I didn't remember many of the lowlights, you know, and if I whatever I remembered, I kind of turned into a joke, you know, like, "Oh, here's a funny story." And then when I went through the process, because you know, like I said, a couple years ago when I started to explore this and I started going to therapy and kind of like figuring it all out,
Hmm.
I realized that it wasn't funny at all. You
No.
know, it wasn't a joke. That was just like I used humor as a coping mechanism.
Yeah, I mean, and you're good at it because you're a funny guy. And it's true. It's a very easy coping mechanism to use, right? If you get a laugh, even in such, like my brothers and I talk about this all the time. We have gallows humor about cancer, right? We'll make the
Hmm.
wildest jokes about cancer, even though cancer sucked for us. And it sucks for us now where, there's not a moment that goes by where I'm not, going to the doctor to check to see if I have a colon polyp or something like that. Like that comes up all the time. And I guess if you don't laugh at it, it's hard to even think about. But let's talk about you wrote this book. And I think the book is a good place to start. And through the book, we can talk about your early life also.
Hmm.
So why don't you just, summarize a little bit of the book? I read it a long time ago when it came out. It's fantastic. And for a person that I, knew as a very close friend, right? Some of the stuff you wrote about was so deep. And so I didn't realize a lot of things that were going on there. And I don't think I even knew the full story of everything that happened. So that book was fascinating to me. But tell us a little bit about the book and, how it kind of interacts with your life today.
Yeah, I think that's, you know, that was the impetus for writing the book because I felt, you know, after I got married and my wife was pregnant with our first child, I was like, okay, it's time to put this in a book because I wanted to kind of preserve it and I wanted a way to get it out there because I
Hmm.
felt like I was pretty good at sharing those stories about things that happened to me and the entire process and stuff. But I anticipated that my life was going to just take a turn. And so you were saying before that there's like this, you know, it's almost like we have past lives in this life, right? And it was almost like intuitively I knew that my life was going to take on a different like, I wanna say role, but, like, it just like, it's gonna be a different life, and it's gonna have fragments of what happened to me in the past, but I'm not gonna be a walking, talking billboard for what happened there anymore, and I felt like
Hmm.
I needed a place, like a vehicle to put that in for safekeeping, like, so I wouldn't totally lose it, you know?
Yeah.
Especially because the book itself, so it's about my spiritual journey, it's about healing, and it's about my mystical experiences, and you know, that's something that I weaved into most conversations, you know? I think that it's part of my design, to deliver, like, shocking, like, information to people, not in, like, a way that makes people unsettled and scared, but in a way that maybe does, like, make them think differently, like, open up their consciousness to, like, "If this guy's for real, maybe I should think about that for
Hmm.
2 seconds," you
Hmm.
know? So I always had kind of, like, would find ways to kind of weave that into most of my conversations. And then I just knew that my life was going to be different and I wasn't going to have the space for that as much anymore. So the book was just an opportunity for me to get it out there. And it was great. And it kind of talked about what I did, like my personal journey. Everybody's goes through their healing journey in their own way, right? And it was like, this is how I did it.
Hmm. I mean, so if you wouldn't mind, like, it's a powerful book in that you started to experience the paranormal. I
Yeah.
mean, carte blanche. You lost your girlfriend, fiance. I think at the time was she your fiance at the time? Uh,
Yeah. So unofficially, but yes.
yeah, and in 9/11, which in itself, even without losing a loved one, 9/11 was like a scar, an open wound still for many people to live through it. And
Hmm.
on top of that, you lost one of the 3,000 people that were killed that day. And then you started to get signs from this person.
Hmm.
And, I think we're actually in a better place in this day and age to talk about those things because I feel like the world is opening up to those things. This is not an odd conversation anymore to have. Where I think maybe back then people were like, "Oh, this what? Okay, what? You're psychic now? What?" Now I think
Right.
I think even my father-in-law, who is the most father-in-law ever, like a very typical father-in-law, We had a conversation the other day about past lives and about psychics, and I would never expect him to A, want to have that conversation, and B, enjoy that conversation. So there's something happening to the world right now that I think is very interesting. So if you wouldn't mind, maybe tell us a little bit about, a little bit about the book and the journey and what you saw, you know?
Yeah, so I guess I would start off by saying that, the night before Lynn passed away, I was up just like I was not a morning person like I am today, right? Like obviously our lives were very different then. So I was someone that was up like, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning was normal for me. So and this was pre iPhones in your hand while you're laying in bed, right? So you're stuck with whatever's on television. So I remember I was flipping through TV, and I saw that there was Larry King Live was on. So he used to have his shows like repeated on like it was 9, 12, and 3 o'clock in the morning or something like that. And so I was watching one of the later ones, and he had the psychic medium John Edwards
Hmm.
on as a guest. Do you remember him? He used to
Yeah.
have a show called Crossing Over.
Yep.
So he was like, so he's interviewing John Edwards, and he was taking live callers, like people were calling in to, get a reading, I guess, from John Edwards. And he was talking about to this woman that was calling in, like, I have your husband here, and he passed away. And he's talking about how you hadn't yet talked to your kids about his death, and you're walking through the park with them, and a feather is like, kind of dancing back and forth, falls down in front of you, and you picked it up and you saw it as a sign, and you were like, it's time for me to have this conversation with the kids that they're never going to see their father again. She's hysterical crying. I'm all choked up,
Uh-huh.
right?
Uh-huh.
And I wasn't really like actively into this stuff at the time. I was
Right.
curious, but it's not like, that was kind of like the door opening to me kind of diving in. But before
Mhm.
that, you know, I was tuned in at this point, and I'm thinking, like, I'm choked up, and I'm thinking, who could I talk to that could make the same deal with me, right? So
Mhm.
I'm like thinking my grandmother, like, who could I ask? Like, listen, when you die, can you come back and like talk to me and give me a sign or whatever? And I was thinking about this, and finally I passed out, went to sleep. And the next morning I woke up, my mom had come. I was living in my parents' house at the time. It was in the basement, like a good 22-year-old
Right.
Long Island boy.
Oh, we all did it, don't worry. You're saving money,
So
it's fine.
yeah, absolutely. So so yeah, so she came down, and she's kind of all like worked up, and she's like, Lynn's building. And she turned on my television, and I saw that one of the buildings had collapsed, and I was just really groggy and confused and trying to make heads or tails out of the situation. And then I remember grabbing my cell phone and trying to call her, but I couldn't get a call through. It was like impossible. None of the lines were working, so I couldn't really reach anybody. And then I went upstairs to the living room, and we had like a big screen in the living room, and I was watching, and that's when the second tower had collapsed. And that's the point where I started to get panicky. Like I moved from the state of like total denial. I'm sure she's fine. She's probably not at work yet. I'm not concerned about this at all, to like, holy shit, the whole world felt like it was collapsing. Like it's one thing for one, commercial plane to hit a building. It's another
Mhm.
thing for, however much time passed, not much time, the second building gets hit. So it really had that feeling. I don't know if you felt
I
this at the time, but like the world
absolutely.
was kind of coming to an end. So I'm pacing back and forth in the living room, and I'm trying to get in touch with her parents at the time, which I was unsuccessful. And I had this feeling like somebody was standing behind me. The best way that I can describe it is like when you're at a party and you feel like someone's staring at you, and you turn around and they are staring at you.
Mhm.
And I turn around to the back. We had like these two sliders. I don't know if you haven't been to
Yeah.
that house in
I
a
remember that.
while, but
Yeah, I
there's
remember.
two, yeah, two sliders. And up against the sliding glass door was a white feather, just kind of moving back and forth, and then it fell to the ground. So I opened the door, picked up the feather, and I was like, okay, I knew right there that was it. That was my sign. But I didn't want to believe it, obviously, right? Because that's what the body does. So I threw it in a jar and was like, okay, like I'm gonna find her, you know. And we couldn't get into the city that day because they had obviously closed everything off. But then the next day, we went in and looked everywhere. Like we had these posters, right? So we took the posters and put them everywhere in the hopes that somebody found her because there were all these stories, which most of them were not true, but there were all these stories that, like, oh, there was a group of people over here and there's a group of people over there. And well, you know, who did she work for? Oh, yeah, the Cantor Fitzgerald. There were Cantor Fitzgerald that and people that ended up over there. So that's what we did. We just like ran around the city every single day, basically chasing leads wherever we could, putting up the signs and just trying to kind of just hoping that like we were somehow going to find her. She was like in a dumpster or hiding or stunned somewhere or something.
Mhm,
And a few days into the going back and forth to the city, my neighbor who lived across the street,
mhm.
this little old Italian lady, Mrs. Corello, and she's like trying to get my attention, right? So I'm about to go into my house and she's like, you know, but that was a typical thing. Like she was always, you know, super friendly. She was like a grandmother to me.
Yeah.
So I turn around and she's like, "Oh, I just, you know, I know you were in the city all day. I just wanted to tell you, something very strange happened today." So I was like, you know, what was it? She said, there was a white dove on your truck. Like while you were in the city, I saw this white dove and it was like on your truck and it was like walking around the truck. And I don't know. I have to be honest, in the moment, I was like, yeah, she probably was imagining it. You know,
Yeah.
it seems nice, you know? And she goes, and this again, pre iPhone, everybody with
Right.
a camera in their hand, right?
Yep.
But she goes, I had a feeling you weren't going to believe me. So I ran inside and I got my disposable camera. And she had taken pictures of the white dove and she had gone to CVS and printed them out. So she
What?
was showing me the actual pictures of this white dove. And she's like, and the crazy thing is, you know, I also saw another white dove on Lisa's truck. So Lisa, Mrs. Kroll lived like almost directly across from me, and then to the house to the right of her, there was a family, and they had like it was a two-family house. So upstairs they had tenants. I never met those people. I saw them get in and out of their cars sometime, but I never actually knew them. So it turns out Lisa was the name of the woman that lived up there with her husband. So she's like, there was a white dove on your truck, and there was a white dove on Lisa's truck too.
Wow.
So, it turned out, which I didn't know this until afterwards, but Lisa's husband was also, in the World Trade Center. He perished with Lynn. They both worked for Cantor Fitzgerald.
What? That's
So
wild.
so two people, both lost someone, both the same exact signs, both caught on film by, you know, not me. So you could say like, because I have more stories too. I won't share them all
Mhm,
today. They're all
mhm.
in the book, but
Yeah.
just to give you an idea, you know, there were times where I was like, am I losing my mind? Am I just making this shit up because it makes me feel better? But there were always other people, there were always other witnesses that
Mhm.
could corroborate the story. So even when I got to that stage where I was like, I think I might just be making it all up, there was always other people that were right there
Yeah.
witnessing it with me, which just made it that much more real.
There are a ton of stories around 9/11. I was listening to I'm like a proficient podcast listener, and I listen to everything. And
Mhm.
there was like it's like a call-in show where people tell their ghost stories, paranormal stories. And there was this man from Venezuela who called and left this message on a line. He just told a story, and he was awoken from a dream in the middle of the night of two planes flying across the Statue of Liberty and into the World Trade Center. And he woke up that morning and it had happened. And he's like, I don't know why I would dream this. I never thought of America. And I had this dream and I woke up and that was what was happening. You know, then there's all this talk about, there are, colleges, I think MIT is one of them that they study like, they use these random number generators to study
Mhm.
if um, emotion can influence the world, right? Can you study a huge flux of influence? And I guess the day before 9/11, the random generators stopped generating random numbers and they were generating more ones than zeros. So, like, and this is before it happened. So it's kind of like it's such a, I don't know what to call it. It's just such an event that I was trying to explain to my kids the other day how my life is very different before and after 9/11, and I didn't lose anybody, but the world is incredibly different. And I'm like, you guys don't understand almost the freedom we had to live like a carefree life. Like there was no security at the airport. There was, all this stuff. There was no, big brother watching with every keystroke and everything. So that whole thing in general was a big change in life. But those stories are wild. And, I hope to God that, you know, we continue to see more of that kind of, you know, I guess different dimensional communication somehow. That would be fantastic if we could figure out how to keep that going. But so you write the book, you get past 9/11. You get past this insane, um, almost unreal event in your life. What do you do? I know you're big on, healing and grieving. So how do you start to heal? Like what do you do to start to heal? I wouldn't even know what to do. So
Right. So for me, so I'll back it up to this. So I started to develop these like health issues as a result of like the emotional overload that I was going through, right? For lack of
mhm,
better words. And I was going to the doctors trying to get all these tests done to figure out what was wrong with me because I had all sorts of stomach issues and GI issues and like, everything was just like building up and I just was not well at all physically. And I went to the doctors. I had lots of tests done and, diagnosed with this, that, and the other and put on different medications. And every time I was diagnosed with something, got a different medication. It worked for like a really short time and then it kind of came right back with a vengeance. So I had this idea that I needed to step outside of like, that box, right?
mhm,
And I had stayed at my uncle's house. I don't know, maybe a year or 2 before 9/11, probably about a year before 9/11, actually. And while I was there, he's got a lot of books, and I was looking through his bookshelves one day, and I saw a book, written by Edgar Casey. I've no idea why I decided to take this off the shelf and start reading it, but I did, and it was really fascinating, right? So, as you know, probably, I'll just say it in case anyone's never heard of it. He's called America's Sleeping Prophet. He used to go into a trance-like state and do readings for almost 10,000 people, I think he did. And a lot of them were health readings. So he would diagnose people with certain illnesses, ailments, and then also what protocol to take for the healing process, right? And he wasn't a medical doctor. He was just getting all of this information like in a trance state, right? In an altered state of consciousness. So I felt like if I could find somebody like him, then maybe I could source out these answers. But of course, he was long dead, so
mhm.
he was out of the equation. And so now I needed to find somebody that was like him. So it wasn't too much longer when I was flipping through a magazine and toward this is back again. Like we're gonna step back in time for a second when you could find ads. When we used to read magazines, A
Right.
and B, there were ads in the back of the magazine that were like classifieds, right? Like
Uh-huh.
people like selling stuff, whatever. And there was a small ad for this guy who said in the ad, he offers Edgar Casey style readings.
Okay.
So I was like, oh, wow, this is perfect. So I found the guy. So I call him up and he explains to me how everything works. I make an appointment for 2 weeks in the future. I'm going to go into the city in New York City and meet with him. And yeah, I basically went in there and he said, just bring a list of 20 questions. Like if you could talk to God, if you could sit across, from God and ask him anything, what would you ask? And I brought the questions and I spent an hour with this guy. And so he's like this, you know, warm and friendly grandpa type, demeanor. Go into his office. He kind of sits in a chair, says a little prayer, slips into a trance. And then I was talking to what he says was a group of angels that work together to help humans, right? So I'm like,
Interesting.
sounds great, So
Awesome.
I'll I'll take it. No, you gotta remember, I was pretty desperate at this point.
Right.
So that's really what drove me to that room. But ultimately that was an incredibly healing moment because they revealed to me, I say they because it was a group of angels, according
Mhm.
to Bob. The guy's name was Bob.
Bob gets it, man.
Um, yeah, and basically what they said was, this is what happened to you. This is why you got sick. You were always destined to be with Lynn. And she was destined to go when she went. And this is your life path. This is what you're supposed to do with it. A little bit about some of my past lives and some of what I could expect in the future. And that was a game changer for me because they revealed to me certain things about myself that I didn't that nobody knew except for me, right? So that was the evidence that I needed to know that this was legit.
Yeah.
And then the advice or the guidance, if you will, was nothing's actually physically wrong with you. You're suffering from the physical manifestations as a result of guilt.
Hmm.
And so they said the pain so, like, the pain is already in the body, but we're gonna teach you how to do, hands-on healing, which they did, and then I explored Reiki after that, just because that's just my nature is, like, you teach me something, I have to go and, like, get certified in it or, like,
Sure.
take a workshop or a course or something like that, and I did, and I went and studied in Reiki for a while and then became a Reiki practitioner. But yeah, that was probably the single biggest game changer, I would say, for me, because I never had an experience like that. Okay, so let's go back to childhood for a second. Raised Catholic,
Mm-hmm.
in a really religious household, went to Catholic school, was surrounded by, friends with like deep religious belief systems. And so there was no place for any of this. So this was kind of like a paradigm shift,
Mm-hmm.
buster for me, I guess you could say.
Sure.
And it was already starting to happen before I sat with him because I was getting all these signs and these like after death communications from Lynn afterwards. So that was already starting to go, wait, this doesn't fit my old model of the world.
Right.
Because if she's not in the body anymore and she's still able to communicate with me, that must mean that the soul survives the body. So where does the soul go? And where did the soul come from? Like, where did we
Mm-hmm.
originate? And none of these questions could be answered within the framework of the religion that I was raised in, right? It was all just metaphorical. Like a lot of the stories that we were taught were just, stories.
Yep.
But I was living this. This was my
Mm-hmm.
real life. I
Yep.
wasn't in a story anymore. Um, so anyway, so that was the beginning. Then sitting with them and getting all that information. Now I could never be the same, even if I wanted to. Because now like I'm living with this idea that um like there's more to life than I used to think, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even if I suspected that in the past, now there was evidence to prove that that was definitely true. So that sends me on the path.
Well, it's funny you say that. I was watching the other day. I was watching this movie. It's a UFO movie called The Age of Disclosure. Right? It's about like 40 top politicians, scientists talking about how the U.S. government has had a program to study UFOs and retrieve like spaceships, right?
Mhm,
And study them for since World War II. And I'm blown. I think this stuff to me is like super fascinating and paradigm shifting. And
mhm.
my wife is like, so what? So what if they're aliens? I'm like, what do you mean, so what? That means that half the shit that we think is real isn't real. We've been told there's no aliens. And what if they're angels? They're not aliens. What if they're demons? I don't know. Like
Right.
that just like I think personally, I think that there's something more spiritual and less sci-fi about UFOs in general. But I think it's just to me, number one, I want that to be real because I think that looking at the world, the hustle and bustle, you go to work, you come home, you make dinner, it's so humdrum. But if you then start to realize that there is a spiritual world around you and your brain is probably an antenna, not a computer that can tap into it, that is awesome. And then you start to think about, speaking of Catholicism for a second, we went to church and stuff. They strip all the magic out of that. There's no magic in church. There's just, except for the one miracle, he died and came back. Besides that, but don't worry about that. That's just for him to do, right?
Right.
So I
Right.
I think that number one, if the Catholic Church leaned more into the magic, it might be cool to go there again. But number two, like they've made everything so humdrum, where it's like, okay, now this is where you stand, this is when you sit, this is when you thank your neighbor, yada yada yada.
Mhm.
But I just find that all of that stuff, any possibility that the world is bigger than we've been taught or that we think is just, I think, amazing, and I think I hope more people feel that way.
Mhm.
Um, but
Yeah, I think people are, it's contagious, right? So I think as it starts to spread, it will spread more. I was amazed at some of the people that I've been working with, studying under, or books that I've read, authors that I've read back when it was like I didn't tell anyone about it. Now they're on Joe Rogan,
Mhm.
like as guests. So
Yeah.
and now all of a sudden, what I used to have these types of conversations with one or two people, now I can have like in a room full of people, it's just more accepted now.
Now, throughout this whole time, I know you're a chef and you were a fantastic chef. Are you still cooking? Are you still is that a path that you're still taking? Like now and even back then, did you stick with it?
Yeah, that's a good question. It is a past life.
Yeah.
I haven't cooked professionally in about 7 years.
Okay.
So after 9/11, I like left culinary school and then went through my whole process of healing and all that, and then went back to culinary school, finished, graduated with a degree in culinary arts, and then worked at the Garden City Hotel, and then started a private chef company, which grew into a catering company, which I operated for 17 years, right? So that was, as you know, that was like
Mhm.
Long Island and New York City and New Jersey. And that was great, but I always knew that that wasn't going to be where I ended. I knew that that was just like, this is what I'm going to do during this time. And when the book came out, I did a speaking tour, to promote the book, and started to meet people that were interested in working with me one on one because they were drawn into the story and they wanted to have their own version of like, what I had gone through. And so I started working with coaching. I didn't know what they wanted, what capacity they wanted to work with me. But it seemed like at the time, this is like people were just starting to talk about life coaching. It wasn't, again, part of the normal conversation, but like, especially people that were into self help or personal development, it was like, maybe not everyone had a coach, but everyone kind of knew what it was at this point. But it was just on the like the leading edge, like it wasn't in mainstream or whatever. But I ended up going to Tony Robbins and studying with him to do strategic intervention, which is a form of coaching. And I was doing catering and coaching at the same time. And then I eventually eased out of catering and just now I do coaching full time, which is I've been doing for a while.
That's fantastic, man. Now, you wrote this book a long time ago now, but it's gotta be how was it, 20 years ago?
It's
More
probably 16 or 17 years ago.
so
Yeah.
you write this book and you begin on this spiritual path, but also a healing path for yourself. But, you're still healing, right? So take me through kind of phase 2 of your healing journey. What didn't you get this Casey style reading. He tells you where you how to heal yourself and where you're going, but you've obviously learned more, right, since that initial reading. So what else have you learned so far since that first healing journey?
So I think the first healing journey for me, if I could sum it up succinctly, it would just be like the 7 year period between 2002 and 2000 and oh, like 6 or 7 years. I can't say exactly, but around maybe 6 or 7 years. But 2002 to about 2008, maybe a little bit smaller than that. Of this time in my life where I didn't have many responsibilities. It really was just my sole purpose in life was healing and learning and growing and eventually just sort of following my bliss, right? For lack of better words. So what does that mean? Just doing whatever the hell I wanted to do because it felt like the right thing to do. And luckily I was in a position to do that. And also, kind of to your point of what you were talking about before, um, is it escapism? No, I think it's just once you understand that there's a bigger picture, you sort of lose interest in a lot of the humdrum, like, okay, I just don't see the need to do these things anymore. I think there's more value to me in exploring things that are like calling me, right?
Mhm.
As opposed to doing what is considered like responsible for this age of my life. And so, and by the way, the angels kind of gave me permission to do that because they were
Mhm.
like, "That's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to just try everything right now." So, like, just real quick, I went to Puerto Rico because I wanted to get my health in order. I did a 2 week cleanse in Puerto Rico, just eating eating blended greens and wheatgrass every day for 2 weeks.
Mhm.
Met a girl while I was there, hit it off with her. She lived in Chicago, went to Chicago with her. We went to Second City, the improv comedy
Mhm.
club, and that was the first time I had ever seen that live. I was completely drawn in. I was like, this is amazing. I definitely want to explore that. Went back to New York, looked it up. There's a place in New York City where you can, take classes or
Mhm.
whatever, Upright Citizens Brigade. So
Yeah.
I signed up for that, started taking classes. Next thing you know, joined a troupe, was traveling around the city doing improv shows, got acting coaches, got singing coaches, got comedy, like just that was my life. And like exploring Reiki, being a Reiki practitioner, showing up at different Reiki circles, reading every single spiritual book I could get my hands on, everything mystical, everything metaphysical, just to try to make sense out of like the experiences that I was having. Um, and then I would say that I got to this point where I felt really good about who I was, my place in the world, and I felt safe and I felt calm. And I wanted to share my life with somebody now, which I didn't
Mhm.
feel that way previously, for a while. And so that's when I decided that I was going to go on eHarmony. Um, and you know what eHarmony is,
Of course,
obviously,
yeah,
right?
of course, yeah,
So I
yeah,
know you married
yeah.
your college sweetheart,
I
so
did, but I know certainly know eHarmony, and,
yeah.
that's great. I mean, that's awesome, though, you know? And I think if I'm gonna jump in for 1 second, that is what we so often are not afforded the time to do, right? Is or we are afforded it, but we follow the advice of a parent to be like, no, what you really should be doing is going to college and then this and then that. And that's how I feel so often that people wind up unhappy later in life because, yes, like that is a path, but is that your path? And I
Right.
think, you are one of the people, and maybe one of the fewer people, unfortunately, that did follow your gut, right? You followed your path and what made you happy you did. And I hope and it seems like it's the right thing to do, right? You know?
I mean, I could say at least for myself, it proved to be the right thing to do. I
Mhm,
mean, absolutely. I think, one thing that I didn't notice throughout the process, but because it was, like, kinda underlying, was that there was a tremendous amount of guilt that I suffered for doing those things because even though I got away with it, I still felt bad about it, like, I
mhm,
still felt like and I didn't realize this at the time, now I understand that all that is conditioning.
mhm,
It's being taught at a very young age to be compliant, and
mhm.
so when you step out of those bounds at any age, you might get away with it, but guilt comes afterwards. But what I've come to learn is that guilt is part of that system. It's part of the compliance. It's not about morality. It's not because you should feel guilty because you did this thing. You should feel bad about it. It was really because why am I feeling bad about it? Oh, I'm feeling bad about this because I was taught to feel bad about it. Like you're
Mhm.
always supposed to do what mom and dad tell you to do.
Yeah, 100%. And I think so often when people will kind of cast stones at someone that's following their gut, it's because secretly they want you also. Secretly they wish they did what you were doing. I remember when I had first heard that you were buying an RV and you were going to drive to different states and find out where you wanted to settle. And I was like, that is fucking awesome. Damn, I wish I did that. But I was also blown away by the fact that you would do it. Because that's something that I think everyone wants to do. I certainly would like to have done that. Um, but that's just case in point. You also found a person that shared your belief system. It sounds like to let's figure this out together, right? So that's super important also, you know?
Yeah, and I think along the way, I don't think you just wake up one day and all of a sudden you become this person that follows your gut. I think that you build the capacity over time. And I think that the more you allow yourself to do the things that your inner being is calling you to do, the more you start trusting, like, yeah, that was pretty fucking stupid and crazy, but it worked out. And the more you do that, the more you're like, wow, I always seem to land on my feet. And then after a while, like other people start to mirror that back. They're like, oh yeah, you're the guy who does crazy shit, but always lands on his feet. So that didn't happen because of that one decision. It happened with, you know, many, many, many micro decisions. You know what I mean? Of like,
Hmm.
and that looks like, you know, for people, and I'm just saying this because I'm a coach and I deal with a lot of people who want to do stuff like this, is like, what's that one little thing that you've always wanted to do that you never gave yourself permission to do?
Uh-huh.
You
Yeah.
know, and then you just explore that. And a lot of times people want to do it, but they don't feel safe enough to do it, right? For lots of different reasons. So that's you building the capacity over time. And then yeah, then you get to a point where you just do crazier and crazier stuff, but only because you feel safer and safer in the process. You know,
Hmm.
like what's the worst that could happen? I've been broke, I've had no money, I've had to start over, I've had to recreate my identity. You know, bridges have been
Yeah.
burned,
Yeah, of
bonds
course.
have been broken,
Hmm.
but you know what? I'm still alive, you know,
Yes.
and everyone's still doing what they're doing, you
Hmm.
know?
You know, it's funny. I don't know if you felt like this as a kid, but I was always so afraid to be embarrassed. Like the last thing you want as a teenage boy was to be embarrassed or embarrassing, right? And
Mhm.
so, I played guitar as a kid. I always played guitar. I always wanted to play live and was like, oh God, the embarrassment that would be if I fucked up. And I have played live before. And you know what? I have fucked up before. And it's actually not that embarrassing, to be honest with you. Like,
Mhm.
first of all, the only people you think people are going to laugh at you, but even if you suck at it, they're like, I wish I was doing something like that. Like, that's the energy I got back from people. Like,
Yeah.
even if you messed the note up, that's cool that you tried it, right? And so I
Yeah.
think I wish more people felt that way. I don't always feel that way. I still hold myself back from doing things that I think might be embarrassing. Case in point, this podcast, I was like, I thought about this for years when it
Mhm.
first started to, become a thing. And eventually I was just like, well, why not do it? I mean, and I'll put it out for the world to see. It doesn't matter, right? Like the most that can happen is they won't listen to you. The
Right.
best that can happen is people hear your stories and they meet new people through the podcast. So I think I love that worldview. It's awesome. I wish more people did it. you know.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, so you settle in Carolina. You meet. So tell me about how you met your wife, your current wife now. Like,
Yeah,
how did
so
that
we
happen?
met on eHarmony.
Hmm.
And you know, it took me a while to kind of go through the process because I don't know if you know about it, but you have to answer like 100 questions,
Yeah.
and the whole idea is like they're trying to find someone that is like compatible with you, right? Like the things that are important to you are important to them, right? So you don't have to have like all the same like goals, right? But you have to certain things are like deal breakers. So those things you want alignment in. So she was one of the first person, if not the first person that they sent me and we kind of, you know, chatted back and forth for a while and then we met. We hit it off right away. And then kind of the rest is history. There was again more there were more mystical elements to the beginning of our relationship because I was getting communication with Lynn at that time. And so there was like this validation, like, you know, yes, this is the one. And not some of it was direct.
Uh huh.
Some of it was through like a medium, and I'll give you one quick story
Yeah,
for
for
that.
sure.
So I had gone to there was an article and she was sending me signs like crazy, right?
Hmm.
And there was no denying them. And I was like, maybe she's trying to like communicate with me in a way that I'm not like understanding. So
Hmm.
of course I came to this little like ad that said, learn how to communicate with your past loved ones, right?
I love it.
So I called up DeMeo, and DeMeo was like the only one that out of our friend group
Yeah.
that was like open to this kind of stuff at
Yeah.
the time. I
Yep.
if you were, I didn't know it. Like,
Yeah.
or maybe you weren't at that time, not
I
even sure.
know. I don't even know. I didn't know you were going. I think at this point, like, you know, I think I was so mired in like my life with my wife at the time and girlfriend at the time, and so like I had no idea that you were doing all this soul searching. I only found out later
Yeah,
on. I would have been
yeah.
down with it though, for sure.
All right. Yeah. So I knew Joe was into this stuff. He was always like open to having these kinds of conversations. So I was like, "Will you come into the city and do this thing with me?" And he agreed. So off we went into the city. We go into this room. There's probably like 100 people. We're all the way in the back, right? And there's this woman, Rosemary Altea. She's a British psychic medium. And so she's going around the room and she's like reading people like, "Oh, you know, you over there. I see cats all around you, you know, like," and the woman sobbing. She's like, "Yes, I had 15 cats, blah, blah, blah," you know. And then, you know, she goes over to this, you know, couple and she's like, "Oh, did you lose your daughter?" And they're like, "Yeah," and she's like, "Did you put her toys in the casket?" And they're like, "Yeah," and then, "Was there a pink teddy bear?" "Yeah,"
Of
you know?
course.
And so I'm like blown away. I'm like, "Okay, so there's the evidence that I needed to know that this, like, woman's legit or whatever." And so she's like, "We're gonna take a break, and when we come back, I'm gonna teach you some of the techniques that you can use to communicate with past loved ones." So we all take a break. We come back in, and she said, "Does anyone have any questions?" And I did have a question at the time because I had read in one of the books that if you think about like someone that's passed on, that they can like come to you, right? Like that kind of could call their presence or you could attract them in that way. And I also understood that like when the soul leaves the physical body, that it still has work to do. It still has a life to live. It's not
Mhm.
in the body anymore, but it's still doing things,
It's not just
accomplishing things, learning
floating
things.
around like,
Right.
"When
Yeah.
did you
Just
talk to
waiting
you?"
for you. Yeah, exactly. So I was like, I had this question like, well, if I'm thinking about her all the time, which I was, was that preventing her from, being able to do what like she needed to do? Will you leave me alone, please? Like, will
I
you
have
just let me?
work.
I got shit to do. Can you get your shit together? So,
I sent you enough
so,
signs. Move on.
yeah, exactly. What do I have to do? I've sent you butterflies, doves, feathers. I've smacked you in the back of the head. So, I make your dog bark when you're alone. Come on. So, so anyway, she asked if anyone had any questions. I raise my hand. There's like a sea of people that raise their hand. She like dials right into me, right? She locks right in, and she's like, "I know that you all came here to learn how to communicate with your past loved ones, but there is a girl here standing behind this young man, and she's like desperate to get a message through. So if it's okay with you, I have to deliver this message." Of course, everyone's like, "Yeah, I got to do what you got to do." So she locks in with me, and she's like, "There's a girl standing behind you." She describes her. She's like, "She came here to tell you what her last moments on Earth were like." Now,
God.
granted, this woman doesn't know who I am from Adam, right? I've never
Mhm.
met her before. There's like no one knows me at all.
Right.
And she's like, she's here to tell you what her last moments were like, and she starts to describe she's working in a building. Because at first she doesn't come right out and say it was 9/11. She's just kind of describing
Right.
like she's in a building, it's really busy, things are chaotic, there's lots of stuff going on, and then they hear a loud noise in the distance. I don't know what that's all about, but there's a loud noise in the distance, which, that ended up being the first building, right?
Oh,
So
man.
she was in the second building. So like that was what she heard when the first building got hit. And then she's like, and then there was like an alarm system like going off, and they were like, people were getting a little nervous and confused, like, what's going on? Loud boom, now the alarm system's going, but they came on the loudspeaker and they said, everything's fine, just disregard, everyone stay where they were. Everyone should stay where they
Whoa.
are. And she's like, so I'm like, she's trying to piece it all together because she really doesn't know, because if you know anything about like, evidential mediumship, it's like whatever comes in, they just kind of start throwing it out there. They don't, it's not like direct, like
Mhm.
man to man communication,
Right.
it's just kind of like random bits of information that you try to like string together to make some coherent story out of, right? And hopefully the person knows what the hell you're talking about and they
Right.
can nod or be like, nope, you're way off.
Yep.
So she says basically, before you, so they're told to stay put, and she said, "I was very optimistic. I wasn't worried at all that, there was something really wrong." But she's like, "But the phones weren't working, so I started to get a little nervous that I couldn't get in touch with you, and I couldn't get in touch with my parents. Like, it just felt that was unsettling to me." And then she said, "Before you know it, the ground, like, under her started to give out." And she said then she was able to see angels everywhere surrounding her. And she said she started choking because the smoke was like coming up
Mhm.
underneath her, but she felt no pain, no pain at all. And then that's when, around this time, she's like, "Oh, she was in the towers, wasn't she?"
Oh my
And so,
god.
of course, I'm like, "Yeah, she was in the towers." And I was like standing there with Joe, and she was like, "And she doesn't want to ignore you. Like she loves you too." And she starts like talking, sending a message to Joe. And basically she's like, "But my biggest I found out immediately." So the angels surrounded her everywhere. So she was carried in a sense, right, to the next level, right? So the next level of consciousness when she left her body, basically, it was very peaceful. She said it was the most beautiful experience of her entire life.
Okay.
She felt very safe. It was like she wasn't scared. Um, and she's like, but I was never able to get that message to you. I was never able to communicate with you. So this has been my attempt at like getting you
Yeah.
this information that I'm okay, that everything was okay, that my time was my time, that I was meant to go when I did, and we were meant to be together for the time that we did, but we were never supposed to get married like we thought. There's somebody else for you in this life.
Okay.
And she's like, and I'm gonna help you find her. I'm gonna direct you to her, and I'm even gonna pick out the ring. So,
No.
so at the time, like I didn't want to hear all that. I'll be
Right.
honest. I was heartbroken.
Hmm.
I wanted her back.
Hmm.
So part of me was grateful for the message and felt closure and healing, but another part of me obviously wanted her back and
Sure.
didn't want to think about my future or anything like that beyond like that relationship. So moving forward, I met Kate online right through eHarmony, and things were going really well. And I'm gonna speed this up a little bit. We're getting towards so I think it's around August, and I was supposed to like propose to her in September because we were going to a Dave Matthews concert, of
Nice.
course. We were going to a Dave
Love it.
Matthews concert in I don't know if it was like around the Boca, Fort
Okay.
Lauderdale, somewhere
Yeah.
somewhere down there
Yep.
area,
Yep.
right? So
Yep.
my sister lived down there at the time, so that was the plan.
Hmm.
And I had said to my friend, I was like, "Yeah, I plan on, proposing to Kate that weekend." But my goal was like we were going to go to the concert, and then I was going to rent a car, and I was going to drive her down to the Keys, right, to
Hmm.
Key West, and I
Nice.
was going to propose to her in
Solid.
Key West, right? That was the plan. So. My friend's like, "You're an idiot. Like, do you know how hard it is to like get a ring and all that stuff? Like, you like, have you
Right.
planned any of
No.
this at all?" So I was like, "No, I haven't." So she's like, "You need to get." I thought you just walk into a store
No.
and you walk out with a ring.
Right.
So she's
No.
like, "No, you're gonna go to my family jeweler, right? This is my friend Jill.
Mm.
You probably know Jill. You
Yeah.
remember Jill, right?"
Yep. Yep.
So she's like, you're gonna go to my family jeweler. So I was like, "All right." She's like, she was married to, still is, but this guy Pat, and she's like, "Pat's gonna take you to the family jeweler,"
Uh-huh.
but we couldn't coordinate for whatever reason. We just couldn't coordinate, so I could never get to their family jeweler. And I started to get like a little like panicky as the time was
Right.
progressing. I'm like, I probably should figure this out. So I was telling Chris how. I was like,
Nice.
"Chris, I don't know what to do." I was like, "I need to get a ring." He's
Yeah.
like, "No problem." He's like, "I'll take you to my family jeweler." So
Why is
I
it when
was
I have
like,
family
"Okay."
jeweler? I
I know.
don't have. I don't have a family jeweler. I feel like I need one.
After this story, you're definitely gonna get a family jeweler. So Chris is like, "All right, this is the deal. My dad has a family jeweler that he's been using for a long time. He'll take you, right? And you know Mr. Howe, right?
Yeah,
You've
of
met
course.
Mr. Howe
He
before,
doesn't
right?"
seem
So I'm
like a
like,
guy
"Okay,
with a
this."
family jeweler.
Right. And look, we knew each other as like such a nice guy,
Yeah.
salt of the earth type of
Yep.
guy, but it's not like we were like super close or anything.
Right.
But so he comes and picks me up and takes me to like probably the worst part of Hempstead. And it was like it's the scary building. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like I would have never entered that building if I wasn't with his dad,
Yeah,
right?
of
Who
course.
is like the best line of defense in
Yep.
probably one of the worst parts of Long Island.
Yeah.
So you're following me with this story,
Yeah, of
right?
course.
So
By the
we're
way, hold on.
sitting.
This is
Okay.
a Dave Matthews Cup, by the way, just
Oh,
FYI.
nice.
So, there you
Okay,
go.
good. Yeah. So you understand.
Yeah.
So we go to this place, and I had basically an idea of exactly what Kate wanted as a ring because we had talked about it a little bit, and I was smart enough to take like my friend's advice, Jill, and say, find out exactly what she wants. Don't pick out what you want. You have to
100%.
get what she wants. So I was
Yep.
like, all right. So I have it all kind of worked out. So sitting down at this guy's like desk, right? In, like I said, in Hempstead. And he's like, so he's basically like, how it works is you're going to tell me what you can afford,
Right.
and I'm just going to dump a bunch of diamonds on the table, and then I'm going to push all the ones aside that you can't afford, and then
Right.
I'm going to leave the ones that you could afford, and then you're going to pick out which one you want, right? So I was like, okay, sounds good to me, right? So I
Perfect.
tell him this is my budget, whatever, and he does his little thing, and so now he's like, he sees me kind of like struggling. Like, I don't really know. There's all sorts of shit, right?
Yep.
Clarity, all the shit, whatever.
Yep.
So I don't really know, but, and I'm struggling, and he could tell that I'm struggling. So he's like, all right, you know what? He's like, look through this catalog, right? So I'm looking through the catalog, which is only making matters worse, right? Because now you're just adding more things, like more like
Too many
variables into the
options.
equation. Yeah.
Yep.
So my head is spinning like a top. And he's like, all right, this is what we're going to do. So he opens a drawer. He pulls out this envelope. He's like, I'm just going to put this diamond into this setting so you have an idea of what it's going to look like. So I was like, all right, that's good. Sounds good to me. So now he's narrowed down my 10,000 options to one,
Awesome.
right? So, and now I can't see anything else.
Yeah.
So I'm like, yeah, that's the one. Like, I don't care, right? So he's like, what do you mean? I'm like, that's the one. He's like, but that's not what you said. I was like, I don't care. That's the one. Like, it just felt like nothing else existed except for that ring. And then he goes in his Russian accent. He's like, oh, you've got to be fucking kidding me. I'm like, what? And he says, true story. He goes, somebody called and ordered that ring. He's like, I have never taken an order from somebody I never knew before. I took this order. The girl never showed up. I have no idea like who that person was that ordered this ring. It's been sitting in that drawer. And now here you are saying that you want that exact ring. I'm like, yeah, that's the ring. So then he goes, and he's like, all right, if she ends up not liking it, and I can't remember if I asked him this or if he just offered it, but it doesn't matter. If she ends up not liking it, I can return it. I can melt it down. I could chop it up. I could do whatever I need to do. But at least you have, a good jumping off point.
Yeah.
And so I felt like pretty good about that. And then of course, took that ring down to, the keys and proposed to Kate.
Nice.
And the weird thing was that, so I proposed to her, right, on Duval Street, right? And classic. I knew you would appreciate that. And something weird happened that night. So it was like the diamond was in the middle, and then there were channel set diamonds on both sides. And so they kind of got smaller as the ring, like as it got closer to the next finger. And the second diamond to the biggest one was completely yellow, right? So I was like, oh, you must have spilled something on it, or something got spilled on it, or whatever. So we kind of frantically took it to one of the jewelers there to get it cleaned. And the jeweler was like, oh, he's like, this is a canary. This is a yellow diamond. This is
Ooh.
like, so I was like, no, it wasn't. Cause I had seen this ring. I had looked at this ring at least 1,000 times,
Yeah.
right? Because it's like when your whole life saving goes into a piece of jewelry.
Yep.
You
This
just
is worth a
start-
lot.
You just stare at it
Yep.
like you just can't help yourself. So I knew what it looked like. I would have noticed if there was a yellow diamond in it. So he's like, yeah, no, it's a yellow diamond, and like there's no like imperfection here. There's no blemish. That's just like the breed, So I was like, I don't know, that doesn't make sense. But we took the ring back, and I came back to made an appointment with Yuri to like find out why there was a yellow diamond that randomly appeared in. And when he took it back, he was like, there was no, so what he said basically was that I didn't put that diamond in there. I don't know how it got there. And he's like, if you don't want it, I can take it out, which apparently it's more valuable. So he must have made out on the deal. So he took it out. And the crazy thing was, at this time when all this stuff was going on, I wasn't remembering at all,
Yeah.
that experience when I went to go see the medium with DeMeo in this random room in New York City with 100 other people, where Lynn said, I'm going to help you find her, and I'm even going to pick out the ring.
Interesting.
But that's exactly what happened. And here's the closure for this story, right? So it turns out that Chris's dad's diamond dealer and Jill's dad's diamond dealer were both Yuri.
No.
It didn't matter what path I was going to take. I was ending up in that same freaking room at that same desk with that same person.
I'm like, dude, that is wild. Wild. I
You just
fucking
can't
love
make that shit up.
No, you can't, man. That is a way better story than I have for my ring, but whatever. I'll take your story. Yo, listen, that is fan-fucking-tastic. It really is. So look, let's you've followed your kind of gut and your your ex-girlfriend's kicking down the road till you finally listened to her and you followed all this intuition and you studied with a lot of people and you've been to a lot of places like the Ryan Institute. We talked about, you and I just talked about Tom Campbell a little bit before this. Like, who are some of your favorite teachers? And their ideas. What do you kind of subscribe to as your maybe theory of everything? And where'd you learn that from?
Well, that's a good question because I've been thinking a lot about this lately. I'm writing a second book right now, and
Awesome.
it's basically about everything that happens to me post
Hmm.
like meeting Kate, because that's kind of where book one ended up, to where I am today. And where I am right now, I think kind of answers your question, which is that I believe that we all need to develop our own theory of everything
Hmm.
based on our own personal belief systems, not the ones that were handed down to us, not the ones that were force fed into us, not even any other persons, even the ones that we adopted on our own, like,
Hmm.
that no one made us, take on, but they felt right at the time. I remember one of the first books that I read, this was actually pre 9/11, and I randomly had picked up Conversations with God by Neil
Hmm.
Donald Walsh.
Great book.
Yeah, great
Yeah.
book, and I that was so opening, like eye-opening to me because growing up in like a strict, the parameters of a strict religion with a lot of dogma and knowing that a lot of it was probably not true, but
Hmm.
not having the agency to kind of like go against that, or question it really. So it kind of just sat there like, oh, I'm uncomfortable with this. Like, I don't believe that this is everything that everyone's saying I should believe. Right. And then all of a sudden I come across, Conversations with God with Neil Donald Walsh, and now I'm offered an alternative, right? So, because if you're gonna drop like one set of beliefs, you need to have something else in its place. And this made sense to me. I was like, I can get behind this. This makes a lot more sense. I don't believe that like a guy in the sky that's paying attention to every single thing and he's the moral police and he's just waiting for the second we fuck up so he could throw us in eternal damnation. Like I just wasn't buying that at all, you know? And
No.
so this book was like, no, that's not at all like what I was trying to say. And so it gave me, but my point is I turned even that into a religion, right? So I read that, it felt so good. Then I read book two, I read book three, I read Communion with God, and then I studied it, I memorized it, and I was like, oh, now this is my belief system. And so fast forward to where I am today, which is just like I don't hold on to anything unless I can apply it and prove it in my own life, you know?
Hmm.
So, and then that becomes my own philosophy. That becomes my own theory of everything. And even Thomas Campbell, who I was turned on to a couple years ago, I was like, oh my God, everything that he's saying resonated with me. It just made so much more sense. I understood his framework. I was like, this is a model that makes sense to me. But even that you could turn into a religion because you start listening, reading all of his books, and you start listening to all his podcasts and all his lectures, and you just like want to absorb more and more and more so you can add more of that to your, I don't know, your like intellectual department or
Right.
whatever. But at the end of the day, it's like, okay, it might be true what he's saying, it might not be true, but what's true for me? Like, what out of this is actually true for me? I think at the end of the day, and that's where your wife and my wife, like, are so awesome because when you said that, you were like, "Do you understand what it means that it could be true that aliens, blah, blah, blah?" And
Yeah.
she's like, "So what the fuck does that have to do with the price of beans?" You know, like,
Exactly.
and that's really like super grounding, and I think people like you and I who are interested in these esoteric topics, metaphysics and stuff like that, yeah, we do need to ground ourselves and go like,
Yes.
how does this actually make me a better person? Not like in a moral sense, but like, how am I improving the quality of my own consciousness? Like, how am I, like, when do I get to a point where I can actually say I like who I am?
Dude, that's a very smart thing to say. Um, so interesting. Not at all what I thought you would say. Just because you've studied so many different things, but I think that makes the most sense in that you could spend your life like listening to these other theories of everything. But again, what does it do for you? The whole point of a theory of everything is that it should give you the answer to help
Right.
to then lead a life that is fulfilling and maybe follow your purpose. But man, that's a smart way to put it. It's way
Right. Yeah.
so much better.
And the theory itself should dissolve,
Right.
because your life should take over,
Hmm.
so it's kind of like a framework that maybe gives you permission and makes you feel safe. like safe to operate. But then after that, your life should just take over. Like you should just be living as that person now, not someone that needs to like go back to that teacher for more advice or more guidance, or go like, oh, what would this person say about this? Or how could I use their insight or their theories to like help me make a decision? I think at the end of the day, we're all uniquely designed,
Hmm.
and I think that we all have this like internal guidance system that we need to learn to trust and we need to utilize. And the more we do that, then we're just living life differently. We're living life according to our own terms. Like that's self
Yeah.
agency for me.
Hmm. That's fascinating, man. I love it. I really do. And I think, I think about it a lot, and I think about all these things a lot. And it's funny, you could think about them forever. You could go down the rabbit hole about all these different theories and practices. But reincarnation, though, that's real, right? I believe it is.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, so that's part of my framework,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think that without getting too deep into it, because it's not the ultimate question what I think about everything, but
Yeah.
yeah, I see our body as an opportunity for our soul, which is what we really are, which is like another term for an individual
Hmm.
unit of consciousness. That's what Thomas Campbell would call it, right?
Hmm.
So you have consciousness, which is like the collection of everything, right? And then you have individuated units of consciousness, which is like, okay, if I want to understand who I am, I need to break myself into little pieces. These little pieces need to interact with other little pieces.
Hmm.
And then, like, experiences are going to happen. Data is going to be derived from that. And then I'm going to collect the data and then I'm going to understand myself through these interactions. Right. And so this like life experience becomes like the virtual reality, if you will, to make it
Sure.
all possible. And
Yeah.
our bodies are like basically the avatar or the host for this soul to come in and express itself through the body. But I think the piece of my framework that I feel like differs from anything that I've learned from any other
Hmm.
teacher out there, and only because it's mine and it's mine because of my own personal experiences, is because of, and we didn't get too deep into this. I know I'm sure we're running out of time, but um, a lot of it, like my most recent realizations is the childhood trauma,
Hmm.
and how trauma fragments us and how we exile parts of us, in order to move on, right? Like we
Right.
kind of talked about this a little bit
Yeah.
earlier, right? And how does that affect us? So if the soul's mission is to come here and is and express its fullness, right? Um, through the physical body, right? The
Hmm.
physical body has to allow that to happen. In other
Right.
words, like you have to, the body has an agenda, and that's to survive, right? If the body does not survive, then the soul never has a chance to express itself.
Hmm.
So safety trumps like
Yeah. Your job any day of the week.
right,
Yeah.
absolutely. And
Hmm.
but I think that, a lot of us in like the spiritual community, and now there's a name for it, they call it spiritual bypassing, but a lot
Hmm.
of us we get so caught up in, this magical thinking,
Yeah.
because we're trying to figure out how to get to our essence without ever having to touch what really hurts along the way,
Yeah.
right?
Yes. Yeah.
So for me, I feel like the most important thing is like learning how to be safe, right? Because if we can learn how to be safe, then by default, we're going to be emotionally regulated. If
Hmm.
we're emotionally regulated, then our soul has a chance to express itself in its fullness, and
Yes.
when it does, then we live according to that, right? And then there's
Yeah.
no theories. Like there's no like, how should I behave? You just are that. You're like the
Right.
fullest version of yourself. But it
Hmm.
all starts with safety. And I
Yeah.
wouldn't know this if I didn't go through this process myself. And so maybe I'll tell you that story really quick. I know I'm
Yeah.
sure we're running
For
out of
sure.
time,
Yeah.
but
Tell me your
when
story, and then we'll wrap it up. I do want to hear this though, for sure. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So as you know, I was really interested in channelers because I had gone to Bob, who was like,
Yeah.
my
You.
first experience, and
It's awesome, by the way, Bob.
yeah, I went to Bob. So Bob became a great friend. I ended up going to him for, I don't know, close to over 20 years, 4 or
Really?
5 times a year. Yeah.
All right.
I had probably one of his last readings before he passed away. I could barely even understand what he was saying, but he was still doing the work. But it was very valuable. It was very healing. I learned a lot about myself. I learned about like what I was capable of, right?
Hmm.
Um, and one of the things that they had said to me was, "You have the ability to do this work yourself. You don't really need to be coming with us. It's not something we recommend you need to be trained in, but it's just going to happen." But it never happened.
Hmm.
So I was like signing up for every class, every workshop,
Yep.
every person, you could find. And I would like get bits and pieces of it, but nothing like I was waiting for I was going to find the teacher that was going to knock my ass out. And then I was
Right.
going to be like,
Yep.
greetings, like, and start like talking,
Yep.
channeling some being or a group or whatever. And that never happened. So I get to this point where I decide that I was listening to a lot of Abraham Hicks. I don't know if you're familiar with Abraham. And it really resonated. Like the stuff that came through her really resonated with me. It made a lot of sense. That was where I got a lot of the follow your own bliss kind of stuff. Like do the things that make you happy. Don't focus on the negative. Focus on the positive. And so I was like, I want to do exactly what she does. And I found out in one of her thousands of interviews that she had this woman who mentored her when she was in the early process of channeling Abraham. So I tracked this lady down, and so it turned out that she was offering a mentorship program where she
Wow.
was gonna, I thought, teach me how to channel, right? So I spoke to her husband, and then because they kind of did the work together, and he's like, "Yep, yeah, we can do that, blah blah blah." So I signed up for the course. It's a 6-month mentorship program, right?
Jeez.
It was very expensive. It was a lot. It was a huge commitment, time wise, resource wise. But I was like very serious about this. I was like,
Uh-huh.
I want that ability. I want to be able to phone home whenever I
Yeah.
want and ask whatever question I need to in the moment. So I have my first call with her, and she's like, okay, before you can start the process, you're going to need to go through this program. You didn't go through the program with a group of other people like I normally do, so you're going to have to do it on your own. I'm going to send you all the work. I'm going to send you all the tapes. I'm going to send you all the videos, and you're going to do it, right? So I have no idea what the hell she's talking about. So I
Yeah.
investigate it, and I'm like, I don't know. I'm a psych major, right? That was
Yeah.
before I went to culinary school. So I knew a little bit about this stuff, but I was like, this sounds an awful lot like inner child work or something,
Yeah.
which I had no interest in at all. I was like, I just want you to knock me out, and I want to start talking to dead
Yeah.
people
Right.
or aliens or
Yeah.
whoever you got, like just
Yeah.
send them in, right?
Exactly.
So she's like, "No, you're gonna do this work." And so I was like, "All right, I'm committed. I'm gonna do what you think I need to do." She's like, you need to go through a healing process. And then once you do, you're gonna feel safe enough to be able to open yourself up. Because that's really what channeling in is, opening yourself up to information that's out there, right? That really anyone could access, even though some people are wired, for it to be easier than others. um, so I go through this process, and a little reluctant in the beginning, but like I would say once I committed to it and I started practicing it, I was like I knew something was there.
Okay.
Okay, so I was like, what I mean by that is I was like, okay, there are parts of me that are not okay,
Hmm.
that I've been ignoring for a really long time, that
Hmm.
have been trying to get my attention, and I've been shutting them down, ignoring them, and I've been projecting that on everybody around me. And every issue that I've had with people in my life has been because they become like a shadow figure for some part of me that's not okay because I had some type of trauma in my past.
Uh-huh.
And so, but along with that comes a technology to be able to communicate with these parts of yourself in a healthy way, right? Because I
Okay.
wasn't doing this, with any kind of like clinical staff members or anything
Right.
like trained therapists, or this was all like through this lady who was channeling information through this entity called whatever. I'm not going to say it, but
That's great.
so yeah. So I go
I'm
through the
skeptical.
process. It opens up it opens up all this stuff for me, and I start having, just tons of memories from early in life. And it caused me to have a lot of really uncomfortable people, a lot of really uncomfortable conversations with people in my past.
Okay.
And but it also caused me to understand why certain things happened. And so let me give you an example because I feel
Yeah,
like
for
I'm
sure.
talking like in code or something, and it's hard to kind of like feel
Yeah,
like what I'm
teach me.
talking about.
Yep.
So basically, it's I'll try to give you an example um, without getting too personal.
No, for sure. Yeah.
Um, yeah. So basically, you have an issue with somebody in your life, right? So
Mhm.
this is the process. Maybe I'll start there. This is
Yeah,
the
do that.
process. So you have an issue in your life. It's in the present day. Something's happening and it's causing you some kind of upset, and that shows up somewhere in the body, right? So the idea is you, in a session, in one of these sessions, you bring your consciousness or your awareness to that spot in the body. So let's just say, like, I think about this thing that just happened. I got into an argument with my mother-in-law. I'm making this up. Never happened because we never get into arguments. And I'm feeling, like I have an upset stomach. So that's my entry point. So I'm focusing, bring my awareness to my stomach, go into that spot, and I allow for something to emerge. Maybe it's a voice, maybe it's a memory, maybe it's an image, right? And so the first thing that pops up now, like let's just say, is a memory from childhood, right?
Mhm.
So let's say that memory is me when, I was embarrassed because I did something and a bunch of people laughed at me, blah, blah, blah. I remember it like it was yesterday. So now we use the faculty of our imagination
Mhm.
to create a relationship with this version of ourselves. So let's just say
Okay.
I was 6 years old in in this frame, right? And so now I'm going, hi, it's me. I'm introducing my 47-year-old self to this 6-year-old. And I'm saying, you're probably surprised to see me here, but I'm here to have a conversation with you. And you basically are giving a voice to this kid and saying, like, what's going on? Why are you
Yeah.
upset? Blah, blah, blah. And so, he hopefully, if the process is going well, right? Then he'll open up and say, this is what's going on. This is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm thinking, blah, 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 which he really needed at the time. Like, he really needed somebody to make him feel safe, but nobody was there to do that. So now you're showing up and you're going, okay, I'm here for that. That's why I'm here. It took me a while to get here, but
Yeah.
I grew up. I did whatever I did to get to this point, and now I'm coming back to rescue you, basically. And
That's
so
awesome.
what you do is you soothe him and you heal him and you basically invite him back into your life. If the process is going well, he's like, yeah, I feel better, blah, blah, blah. And this could go 100 different ways, but I'm
Sure.
just painting it in one direction. So things are going better. So you offer him an opportunity to come and be a part of your life, right? And so he trusts you. Maybe he feels safe and he's willing to do that. So not only have you healed that part of him, but now you also have access to whatever he had that was
Uh-huh.
shut down at the time, right?
Interesting. Yeah.
So let's just say, for example, he's super creative, right? But you lost access to that creativity because you exiled him in the
Mhm.
process. And it was only done because it's about feeling safe, right?
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
always about safety. So I'll try to tie this whole thing together. Um, so that's one process. That's the integration. Like that's how big, and like you could go through that process infinite number of times. Like
Yeah, for
anytime you
sure.
have like every time you get into an argument or something doesn't go well, and then you could just go, in a quiet room and create this opportunity where you connect with this part of yourself, and pretty soon you're integrating these parts back into your life, and you now have access to these parts of you that you've exiled, and now
Mhm.
you're just becoming a fuller, wholer version of
Yeah,
yourself. You see what I'm saying?
totally.
And so as that process continues, right, you're just getting to know parts of yourself that you have forgotten about,
Huh.
right? Like I forgot I liked this and that, and blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
because I froze off this aspect of myself in order to feel safe, right?
Mhm.
Like the first time that you ever did something that you thought was normal and you were free to be that way, and then someone looked at you and made fun of you,
Yeah.
the body was like, "This isn't safe. You're about," you don't understand that this is happening at the time, but you're
Of
shaking your
course.
head, so I think you
I
understand
get
where
it.
I'm going with this.
For
But
sure.
you basically, the body is like, it's not safe for you to be not accepted by these people because on some primitive level, that's about survival, right?
Mhm.
Like you have to be accepted by the group. So maybe just don't ever do that again, right?
Right.
And then
Maybe we
and
stop that.
so yeah, maybe we'll stop that. And that's fine, right? Because that's how you're able to get by and move forward. But then you become, 40, 50, 60, 70 years old, and you're like, you know what's weird? I have no idea who the fuck I am. All I know is, like, who I've created myself to be in order to survive, and sometimes we don't even realize that, but that's
Sure.
basically what it is. So I think, like, to wrap it up, it's just this idea that nothing trumps safety. Like, safety is
Right.
the most important thing. So safety is, like, what you get from going through a process like that. And
Hmm.
safety is like the first step to emotional regulation. And then after regulation is when your true essence or your design, because I believe everybody has a unique design,
Sure.
comes online, right?
Yeah.
And then stays online until we don't feel safe again. And then
Interesting.
it's basically go through the process again until we feel safe and then allow our true essence to come back online. Does that make sense?
Dude, honestly, that makes perfect sense. And I can even, what a great visualization of it, because I'm sure when you're exiling that part of yourself as a child, you're also getting rid of the things they liked, the things they like to do. Like you're cutting a part of your personality out. That's fast,
Right.
dude. That's fascinating, man. I think it's awesome. I feel like you could do that like indefinitely forever, though. You know what
Yeah,
I
and
mean?
you could, but I think it almost becomes like, it's a process that you have to go through in the beginning because
Hmm.
you need sort of some kind of a framework to, like, access those parts of you.
Sure.
After a while, it becomes, like, second nature. It's almost like the system takes care of itself.
Hmm.
And I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
You're in a present day situation where you get into an argument with your neighbor, right?
Hmm.
So, this never happened to me. I've
Right.
never gone through it.
Are you
So
sure?
you're getting into an argument with your neighbor, be and it seems like it's because she's upset that your dog is always barking, right?
Hmm.
And so, and next thing you know, like, I'm trying to make a very long story short, but basically, like, after having gone through this process, you can stop and say, I know that that's not why this is happening.
Hmm.
I know that I don't feel this way because of her. I know
Right.
something inside of me is being activated, and it's reminding me of a part of my life where I didn't feel safe. She reminds me. And what tools do I have to, you know, where I can feel safe again, basically,
Yeah.
so that I don't treat her like I would when I would, because so I had this interaction with her. Now I'm coming clean, and she was like, "You're almost acting childish," which set me off. But then after having gone through this process, I was like, "You know what? She's absolutely right," because she activated the child part in me that never, like, developed beyond that. So now I had to grow up, like, I had to adult. I had to, like, "Okay, so how do I handle this particular situation with this particular person as an adult?"
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, this all came from pain in the body sometimes also, where you can then talk about, like, if you're like, you obviously feel that, a lot of physical manifestations of pain can come from spiritual or emotional trauma, right? Like that's
Mhm.
kind of,
Absolutely.
yeah. I mean, I always felt like the body has all the faculties to heal itself anyway. Like
Right.
we discount the placebo effect, but that is the effect we should be going for in
Right.
life. When it comes to like medicine and stuff like that. Um, Dude, Mark, that is an awesome, awesome idea. I'm going to think about that a lot, I'm sure. Um, so why don't we put a pin in it there? Because I would love to, have you back on and talk about the rest of your work and your theory, and you're writing this new book. So I would love to have you back. But
Yeah, that'd be great.
why don't you where can people find your stuff now? Like you have a ton of stuff out there on the internet and books
Yeah,
and stuff. So,
I'm in hiding right now because I'm just working on the book nonstop. I
okay.
mean, every day, 10 hours a day, just powering through it.
Nice.
But of course, I do have my Substack, which I put some stuff out on there. I'm on, social media, Facebook, Instagram from time to time. And then, and that's it. So when the book comes closer to, getting to a finish line, I'll reach back out and I'll
For
let you
sure.
know, like, more about that and where that can find me. And then of course, markchabus at gmail.com if you need to send me an email. I still do coaching. I do sessions to help people kind of process some of this stuff and develop their own framework.
Yeah.
And that's what the book really is going to be about. It's not like, oh, here's this new theory and, study it. It'll make your life like mine. It's, hey, like, maybe you should think about writing your own philosophy.
Mhm. Dude, that's a perfect place to end it right there, Mark. This was a fascinating conversation. You're a fascinating guy, and I'm glad that you are where you are right now. I'm glad that you were here to share this with us, and I'm glad to know you, my friend.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
we'll hopefully see each other soon someday. Maybe my son's applying for colleges, so we're looking down by North Carolina. We're looking at Wake Forest and stuff like that. So we'll see
Cool.
what happens. All right,
Yeah.
man. I will speak to you soon. Okay. Be well.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, Mike.
See ya.